Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Drinkard Brews. It's February 2023. I've had a little hiatus, and I apologize for that. Thank you to those who have come into the comments and checked up on me or said that they were looking forward to more videos, and I'm very glad to be back with you. Today, I want to talk about some of my ideas about how to build decks to win consistently in Revised 40. Again, like I've said in many other videos, these are practical topics that can be transferred into other formats as well. And so maybe if you have experienced building a deck, creating a brew that just isn't getting the results that you want, maybe some of these ideas could help you. I do want to start off with a big disclaimer, and that is that I am not a spike. I like to brew, and I think I have a good bit of pictures of decks to prove that. I've lost many games in Revised 40, many matches as well. But my favorite matches, and the whole reason I'm doing this video, my favorite matches are the ones that go to a grind, that top decks matter, and decisions matter along the way. And being able to play around removal or play around counters and push through those last few points of damage depends on your deck's ability to win. And so I want at least my decks to have that chance to create those fun, interactive matches. So, with that being said, here are some characteristics of decks that I have had the most success with in terms of having that chance to win, not necessarily having the most success with in terms of win percentage. The first characteristic is that the deck has aggressive starts. You're giving yourself the best chance right off the bat to apply pressure in the early game, and then the opponents who stumble will result in more wins for you as long as you have pressure on the board. Pressure on the board also helps your interaction to be more powerful. Whenever you remove a problematic permanent that the opponent has, having pressure on the board gives them less time to draw that card again. And so this is one of my rules for decks if I want to play in an event that has lots of rounds and I want to give myself the best chance at consistent performance throughout it. Aggressive starts. The second characteristic of these decks are ways to leverage mana flood in the late game. And so a deck that has aggressive starts is going to have a number of 1-drops and 2-drops. And sometimes decks tend to go to 12 to 14 lands to prevent mana flood. But ultimately, if you're playing in an event with many rounds, you're going to experience mana flood at some point. And so I want my decks to be consistent throughout every phase of the game, during the early game and the aggressive start, and to be effective in the late game as well. And when I have drawn my 8th or 9th land, I'm not still drawing 1 and 2-drops, but I can transition into a phase of the game to close out the opponent's life total. And then something that I like to incorporate into each of my decks is some sort of unbeatable draw, some sort of broken opening hand, something that opponents just can't answer. What I found in Revised 40 is that many people favor this sort of broken board state, something that the opponent won't be able to play around or effectively play Magic through. Happens sometimes. I'm not saying it's a big part of the format, but it does happen where a player will play 10 Psychic Venom or 12 to 14 Stone Rains, a bunch of unsummons, a bunch of fogs, something that prevents the opponent from having an answer. But then it lacks the aggressive start, or it lacks the ways to take advantage of the end game once it gets there. And so ultimately those decks aren't going to perform at the highest level. I do have 3 decks that I want to show, and we'll do a quick little deck tech and talk about how each of these decks meet these 3 criteria. The first is red-green beats. So here we have a classic Revised 40 deck. I guess it was nearly a year and a half ago, late 2021, I think, when Curd Apes were upgraded to be uncommon and therefore limited to 3 copies. Before that time, as many as 10 or 12 Curd Apes could dominate the field. And I mean the field as in the battlefield and the field as in the metagame. But once that change was made, I think this deck has split into a few different directions. The direction that I like, again, for consistent performance throughout a game and consistent performance throughout an event, is this 17 land version that has aggressive starts, the Curd Apes and Llanowar Elves with giant growths. It has ways to leverage mana flood in the late game. So we have 17 lands, but also there are 5 X spells, 2 disintegrates, and 3 fireballs, and then Shivan Dragon can just really close out a game very quickly, especially if you're flooded with mountains. And then there's the broken opening hand. I think anytime you get 2 Curd Apes in the opening hand, you have a very difficult to answer board state. And I think whenever you have Channel Fireball in the early game, even against a deck like Blue-White Control, once they've tapped out to play Control Magic or Sarah Angel and try to stabilize the board, it's very easy to slip in with Channel Fireball. And so there's just nothing the opponent can do. This red-green beats deck easily meets the 3 criteria for a consistent performer in Revised 40. Up next, we have Mono Black Rack, a brutal Revised 40 deck, very difficult to play against. Once you overextend to the board to get around the regenerating Will-o'-the-Wisps, you're going to be facing down a Pestilence. If you try to empty your hand so that Hypnotic Spectre, Mind Twist, and Disrupting Scepter don't discard your cards, then you're going to suffer from the rack. And Pestilence, once again, is going to get rid of your permanents. All right, so we have aggressive starts. There's the classic Revised 40 opening of Dark Ritual into Hypnotic Spectre. Sometimes you can play an early Soul Ring or Dark Ritual into a turn 3 Singular Vampire as well, and those are very difficult to answer. But we don't just stop there with the turn 1 play. There are ways to leverage Mana Flood in the late game, and we have lots of Drain Lives and Pestilences to take advantage of these 15 Swamps and the 4 Dark Rituals. You should easily be able to close out the game once you have plenty of mana. And then finally, there's the broken opening hand, which is also similar to the aggressive start of Ritual into Hypnotic Spectre. Or anytime you draw a Mind Twist early, it's very difficult for an opponent to recover. The last example is a little bit shaky with the criteria, but it's close enough for me to include in the video. We have Mono White Aggro. This is, I've said it before, my favorite deck and my top pick for what I would bring to a long event if there were some sort of glory or prize in winning that event. As it happens, and like I said at the beginning of the video, I don't encourage spikiness because this is a fun, casual format, and there is not much to be won, no matter how well you do. But anyway, this obviously has an aggressive start. There are 10 Benelish heroes and 6 2-drops as well to follow up. And the way to leverage Mana Flood in the late game, because this doesn't include the X spells of Drain Life, Fireball, Disintegrate, Hurricane, and other things like some other decks do, we have 2 Armageddons to take advantage of drawing a bunch of lands. We can sandbag those and destroy all our opponent's lands and keep some for ourselves so that we can continue to play. Finally, it has the broken start. Anytime you follow up a few heroes and Pegasi with an Anthem effect, it is very, very difficult for an opponent to stabilize the board. You have very efficient removal and Swords to Plowshares and Disenchant for some of the attempts that the opponents have to answer. Sometimes it helps to look at what things don't meet the criterion. I will say, for example, Merfolk and Revised 40 unfortunately struggle in the format. I think one of the reasons why is because even though it has aggressive starts, even though it has broken opening hands of changing your opponent's lands to islands, giving them all your merfolk island walk and +1/+1, there isn't a way to leverage mana flood in the late game. So there isn't that reach that some of these other decks have. Lots of decks in Revised 40 just miss one of these three elements. And so if you're struggling in Revised 40 to get the results you want or have good, long, interactive, grindy games that are, in my opinion, the most fun ones, you can maybe look and see what the element is that you could incorporate. And some decks just don't fall into this because they're playing a combo or some sort of interaction that just doesn't allow for aggressive starts. And so those are different things that we can talk about in another video later. So I appreciate you guys taking your time and listening to the video. I hope that you do build something in Revised 40 that you can enjoy and have some meaningful interaction with other opponents during games. I do not own any of this art. I do love this farmstead piece in the background by Mark Poole. And I appreciate Wizards of the Coast for having made it so long ago. If you have any feedback, please let me know in the comments. And thank you again. Good luck and have fun.